I'm a big fan of 1988's Beetlejuice. As a kid, I always appreciated it and had fun with it, but it wasn't until I got older that I completely fell in love with that movie. I think it's probably my favorite Tim Burton film, and I'm a Tim Burton fan, whether it be what he did with Edward Scissorhands, obviously Beetlejuice, what he did with 1989's Batman, Batman Returns, Sleepy Hollow, just to name a few. I'm a fan of his work, but I think we can collectively agree that at a certain point in his career, he was lacking the imagination, the creativity, and, pun intended, he was lacking the juice. However, when he got attached to the Wednesday Project and directed a couple of episodes, you kind of got the sense that he was coming back. And here we are, coming back to this franchise 36 years later. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it great? Is it worth checking out? Well, let's talk about it. Starting off with my positives, let's continue this conversation about the director Tim Burton, who, in my personal opinion, has made a return to form with this movie. This movie is completely unhinged. It's wacky, it's chaotic, and all in the best ways possible. To me, this is Tim Burton fully unleashed. You get to see his full imagination on display. I'm just so happy that WB didn't put any restraints on Tim Burton and let him be himself. They didn't make him fit into a studio format for movies that haven't been around in the mainstream for over 30 years. I mean, we've all seen these types of movies that have been away from the mainstream for a long time, and when they come back, things just aren't the same. The style is different. They're checking off a box. It feels watered down. It's just a completely different experience. And they're just grasping and trying their hardest to recapture that magic, but they just can't do it. When it comes to this film, Tim was able to fully bring his style, his flavor, his sense of humor, and his insanity to the sequel, and I love that for him and for fans like myself of the original. This film is just a lot of fun in collaboration with Tim's vision. Much praise to all the incredible artists and production team for bringing this film to life and really showing us there's no limitation to this world. Their imagination is once again on full display. I honestly feel like there's nothing in theaters currently or even this year that matches the same energy, look, and feel that this film has to offer. This is a one-of-a-kind experience. The practicality of the sets, the makeup, everything about this design is just flawless. Whether it be the sandworms or the blending of the CGI, it's all alive, it's all tangible. And it is incredible stuff across the board. One of my favorite things about watching movies, especially ones like this with the energy that this film has to offer, is seeing these accomplished artists and actors fully commit to the project, putting their egos aside or what people think of them aside, and just being present, being in the moment, but more importantly, having fun while doing it. You can see the energy and enthusiasm coming off the screen, and them just giving their all to the project, respecting the project, and servicing the mood and vibe that this film was going for. Now, sticking with that note and talking about the performances and the actors, for the most part, I enjoyed this cast. Starting off with Winona Ryder, who's great in this movie. She's, of course, back as Lydia, the former goth girl turned into a mother who also happens to be a host of a late-night ghost show. Lydia is trying to balance being a mom in this film, but she isn't great at communicating with her daughter after experiencing a loss in their family. Still, I feel like Winona Ryder did such a great job of bringing this character back to life. She is fantastic and hasn't missed a beat in this film. Speaking of not missing a beat, Michael Keaton slips right back into the role like he never left from 1988. The comedic timing of Michael Keaton is off the charts. The quick one-liners are hilarious, and he's just an incredible legend in this role. I can't tell you how many times I either laughed or had a smile on my face whenever he was on screen. Now, without giving too much away, very similar to the original 1988 Beetlejuice, Michael Keaton isn't in it a ton, but I'm okay with that because I like the way they use the character. Honestly, I think he might have been on screen more in the sequel than he was in the original. I like how they used him because it's one of those situations where like, oh, you think he's bad? Wait until you meet someone else. And there's a particular team up that I wasn't anticipating but thoroughly enjoyed. Again, Michael is great. His comedic timing is phenomenal, and he does some pretty wacky stuff in this film that I just had a good time with. Michael Keaton is just a goat. But my personal favorite, my MVP of the film, goes to Catherine O'Hara. She is just so perfect in the role. Like the others who returned to their characters, her timing was perfect, her acting was on point, and her character goes on a particular journey that was just spectacular. Everything that came out of her mouth, for me, was fantastic. She had me in stitches throughout the entire film. They do something with her character that's very interesting, and I just enjoyed it. For me, she was the MVP. Of course, we have some newcomers coming to the franchise who I quite enjoy for the most part. But I think the standout from the newcomers was Willem Dafoe as Wolf Jackson. He was a standout. Again, he's having fun in this role. I really enjoyed him in transition. Obviously, we have a big star in Jenna Ortega, and I'll admit her character definitely grew on me. We'll talk a little bit more about her character later, but I liked her performance. The character is worth discussing here in a second. We also have Justin Theroux in the film as well, and I'll save him for later. Just speaking to the entire cast, everyone just fit into the film. They came to have fun, and I had fun watching them on screen. Now, the last points I have in my positives. I will admit this film has a lot going on for it, but I did like the subtlety in the themes and the story of handling grief and facing trauma while also finding a level of acceptance when you lose someone close to you. To me, that was handled in a way that didn't feel overused, overwhelming, or forced. It worked pretty naturally within this narrative. Lastly, I want to mention that I genuinely had a good time with this movie. As a fan of the original, this was a fun time at the theaters for me. Once the film finally gets going, it hits the ground running. Looking at it from a filmmaking standpoint, I appreciate the craftsmanship and quality of the film. Getting the hair, the makeup, the practical effects are all fantastic. Honestly, just thinking about the joy I had in the theater, if I wasn't laughing, I had a smile on my face. There was this feeling of feeling like a kid again, watching this movie, watching the original 1988 for the first time. What I love about Tim Burton and his imagination is the idea of going back to being a kid and having those moments without allowing your imagination to have limits. This film is just fun to me. From a production standpoint, the movie has a great score, the soundtrack is fantastic, and the use of nostalgic elements really worked for me in this narrative. With all that being said, I do have my criticisms, so let's transition into that now. As I mentioned briefly, it did take a bit for the film to really get going and find a solid rhythm. The first half of the film plays a bit of catch-up. The setup of why they have to return to the original house and why there's tension between Lydia and Astrid wasn't all that interesting to me. But while that was going on, the stuff in the afterlife kept the momentum going. The afterlife scenes, including Willem Dafoe and Beetlejuice, were entertaining. However, the stuff on Earth was a bit conventional and just wasn't as interesting to me personally. Next, I want to talk about Jenna Ortega's character, ASD. Again, by the end of the film, I was on board with the character, but it took me a while to get invested in her story. I understood where the character was coming from and what was going on between her and her mother. But for some reason, Jenna Ortega, as an annoyed teenager, just didn't vibe with me in this film. It kind of came off as forced in my opinion. Her story with another character wasn't all that interesting until a certain point. This wasn't due to her performance. It was more about how the character was written, where it took me a while to really get into what her character was going for. Sticking with characters that didn't really work for me. And it's not because of the performance, but more because of how the character is used, is Monica Bellucci as Dolores. Now, I'm pretty sure it's public knowledge who Dolores is and her relation to another character in this movie, but just in case you haven't seen any trailers, I won't get into that. What I will say about the character is that it's not the performance, it's how she's used. She's pretty much a plot device, and at times, she's just kind of there with not much dialogue. There's really not a lot to her story or development. Again, it's just a plot device, and she doesn't have much material to work with. So to me, Monica Bellucci is a great actress, but she's kind of wasted in this movie in my opinion. That's going to be the end of my pros and cons. Before I get into my final thoughts and score, I want to thank you all for making it to this point in the video. If you enjoyed yourself so far, do me a favor. Hit the thumbs up, consider hitting that share button, and share this video with anyone and everyone you know who's interested in seeing this film. Last but not least, if you enjoyed yourself, consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel. Overall, while Beetlejuice may take a bit to find its rhythm, once it does, it's a wacky good time. This was a true Tim Burton experience with incredible sets, practicality, insane weirdness, and a cast that you can tell is having a blast. Michael Keaton doesn't miss a beat in the role at all. He's fantastic. But, like I said earlier, Catherine O'Hara, was a standout for me. This was definitely a good time, and I highly recommend you check it out, especially if you're a fan of this franchise. I'm going to give Beetlejuice a 4 out of 5. I rewatched the original before I saw the sequel, and it helped me get back into the wackiness and tone of Tim Burton. It was a perfect handoff from 1 to 2. I had a fun time, and I recommend you check it out. If you're a fan of the franchise, I think you're going to have a good time. If you're a fan of Tim Burton, this is him getting back to form, and all the characters, new and old, are fantastic in this film. Like I said, I give it a 4 out of 5 because it's a fun time, it's wacky, it's weird, and I just had such a blast with this film. I'm excited to see it again and curious to know if it will take another 36 years to maybe get a part 3, because the door is open for more stories to be told in the afterlife. That's my thoughts on Beetlejuice. Let me know yours in the comments below. Again, thank you all for watching.